How are you today? I'm so glad you're here and I can't wait to show you how to make a chocolate cake. It's going to be exciting, so strap in and let's go. Hi everyone, welcome back. In this video, we're going to be talking about how to bake a cake and how to get a nice crisp finish on your icing. And it's going to be a 4-part series. The first video is going to be about how to bake a cake. It might sound very elementary, but it's really important to have a good foundation, and so that starts from the moment you pick up your ingredients to start baking. So the first thing we want to do is preheat our oven. Now we want to prepare our pans, and we don't want the cake to stick to the pan, so I love using Baker's Joy, and this is what I use all the time, but there are other methods. You can line your cake pan with parchment paper, or you can make your own goop. I'm using 8-inch cake pans today, and these are perfect for baking really straight-edged cakes. They're very sturdy and they hold up really well. So I particularly like these kind, and I'll have a link in the description on the kind of pans that I use. Now when you're spraying your pan, you want to make sure you're very generous with it, because you don't want the cake to stick to the pan when you're flipping it out. And we've all had that happen before, and we know how frustrating that can be. So make sure that you spray it generously. The next thing we want to do to prepare our pan is to use bake-even strips. And these just help the cake to not form a dome on top, and they bake level. There's several different ones on the market. These are from Wilton, and they work really well. You want to just soak them in water for about 5 minutes. Now that these have been soaking for about 5 minutes, you want to take your 2 fingers and just gently get the extra water out of that so it's not dripping, soaking wet. We want to wrap it around our cake pan, and it's got like a cool little belt buckle there, so you want to loop the end through. So now we just pull this snug against the cake pan. So this is the way Wilton designed this to be attached, and that's fine, it works great. But if you want to just bypass that a little bit, a pro tip would be to just use a straight pin and stick it in, and it holds just fine, and it's a lot quicker. Now that we have our pans ready, we can set those aside and work on our cake batter. Now we're gonna start making the cake. We're gonna start with our dry ingredients, and there will be a link below for the recipe to the cake that I'm making today. One thing that you wanna make sure when you're measuring out your ingredients, especially the flour, is that you're spooning the flour into the measuring cup so it's not packed down in there. If you just scoop it in and lift it out like that, you risk it getting too much flour, and your cake recipe proportions might be off. So you want to spoon it in so that the flour is nice and loose. And once you get it to this point, you want to take a flat edge, back of the knife or the spoon, and just scrape that off to where it's completely level. Once you're done, just put it in the mixer. You can just scoop the sugar out. You don't have to spoon it in, but you do want to make sure that that is completely level. Now, since I'm making a chocolate cake, I'm going to use cocoa powder, and I find that it's better if I sift my cocoa powder. That way I don't have chunks, because sometimes the cocoa powder can have hard chunks that don't really dissolve or break up once you get it in the mixer. So I'm gonna measure that out. So just take a spoon and sift that through. So now we're gonna add the baking powder, the baking soda, and the salt. We're going to put our mixer down and get that started to mix. Now at this point, since we don't have any wet ingredients in here, you can keep this going until all of it is incorporated nicely. Okay, so now we're gonna add our wet ingredients, and I'm using buttermilk in this recipe because it just makes it really good. So adding the buttermilk, vegetable oil, vanilla extract, and 2 eggs. Now your eggs need to be room temperature so that it doesn't interfere with the baking process, and it just bakes a lot more uniform when your ingredients are room temperature. So now I'm going to give that a mix real quick to just combine these wet and dry ingredients. And then I'm going to scrape the bowl down to get all of that dry stuff off of the sides. Oh, and the smell of chocolate is so good. And now, here is where the magic happens. It's coffee. And we're gonna add it to the chocolate. If you want to be able to taste the coffee in there, just make a really, really strong cup of coffee. If not, just make a weak cup and it'll enhance the flavor of the chocolate without overpowering it. So now we're gonna mix the coffee in with the rest of the ingredients. And you wanna be careful because it might splash out at you. Oh dear, this is getting everywhere. So I like to give it a little pulse here and there until it starts to really be combined. So you can see how silky smooth and drippy that is, and that's the consistency that you want with this cake recipe. It's important when you're mixing your ingredients not to over mix it, because then you can end up with a tough crumb. At this point I would give the beater to one of my kids and let them lick it, because all good moms let their kids lick the beaters, right? But my kids are not here today, so they're missing out. My kids are over at my mom's today, so that is letting me have some peace and quiet while I show you how to make this cake. So now we want to get our pans that we prepared beforehand, and we want to fill them to about halfway, or just make sure you divide the batter evenly between the 2 pans. All right, now we're gonna pop these in the oven for about 30 to 35 minutes. So now our cakes are done, and I'm gonna take them out of the oven. Now, one of the things that we notice right off the bat is how level the top is, and that is exactly what these bake even strips will do for you. So once I take the cakes out of the oven, this is how I like to cool them. I get a piece of parchment on a cookie cooling rack, and I put that on top of the cake, and then I flip it over. Now it should have come right out of the pan if we sprayed it well enough, and you see that steam coming up, that's moisture leaving the cake. So we want to immediately cover it with saran wrap so that the moisture stays locked into the cake. And once you have the saran wrap covering the cake, you want to let it cool completely before we move to the next step. In the next video, I'm going to show you how to make the world's best chocolate icing, and I'll have the link over here for you. You can't put them anywhere?
I always see them over on the left side.
Oh.
Maybe you can put them on the right.
You could put them like anywhere, I thought. Like up here, 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 do the Macarena.